What powerful force could possibly convince a person to sacrifice their one and only life for an idea that is demonstrably untrue? Throughout history, from ancient cults to modern-day extremists, countless people have willingly marched to their deaths for a fantasy. This isn't a sign of their strength, but of the immense power of ideology. This video dives deep into the psychology of martyrdom. We will decode the software of fanaticism, exploring key concepts like the reduction of cognitive dissonance, the profound need for group identity, the irresistible allure of an eternal reward, and the chilling process of dehumanizing an enemy. By understanding the psychological mechanisms that can make a delusion worth dying for, we can begin to grasp the tragic human cost of unquestioning faith. The world is full of people who believe that dying for their God is the highest honor. If you believe one life is all we have and it should be cherished with reason, join our community by liking and subscribing. In the comments below, I'd like to build a map of rational thought. Tell us where you're from and whether this kind of extreme belief has a visible presence in your country. The ultimate investment, sunk cost on a cosmic scale. Let's begin with a concept you're likely familiar with, even if you don't know its name: the sunk cost fallacy. Imagine you've paid $20 for a movie ticket. You've bought the oversized soda and the ridiculously expensive popcorn. You're settled in your seat. 15 minutes into the film, you realize it is, without a doubt, one of the most painfully awful movies ever created. The acting is wooden, the plot is nonsensical, and you can feel your brain cells committing ritual suicide in protest. The logical thing to do is to get up and leave. The money is already spent. It's a sunk cost. You can't get it back. Staying for another 2 hours of cinematic torture will not recoup your loss. It will only add the cost of your wasted time and diminish sanity to the bill. And yet, how many of us stay? We think, well, I've already paid for it, I might as well see it through. We throw good money, or in this case good time, after bad. This fallacy operates in all corners of our lives. The entrepreneur who keeps pouring money into a failing business long after the market has rendered it obsolete. The person who stays in a toxic relationship for years because they've already invested so much time and emotion into it. The gambler who keeps betting, convinced the next hand will win back everything they've lost. The core of the fallacy is an emotional aversion to accepting a loss. Admitting that our initial investment of money, time, or emotion was a mistake is profoundly painful. It's an admission of poor judgment, a failure. And so, to avoid that painful admission, we double down. We invest more, hoping to retroactively justify our initial decision. Now, let's scale this up. Let's take it from a movie ticket to a human soul. What is the investment one makes in a religion? It's not just the 10% tithe from your paycheck. It's an investment of your entire identity. You are not just a person who believes in a certain God, you are a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew. Your belief dictates your morality, your daily rituals, your diet, your choice of spouse, your social circle, the way you raise your children, and your entire conceptual framework for reality. You've invested years, decades, a lifetime in prayer, in study, in worship, in community. You have forgone certain pleasures, accepted certain hardships, and structured your entire existence around a central set of propositions. This is not a $20 movie ticket. This is a mortgage on your very being, with your immortal soul as collateral. Imagine dedicating your whole life to this investment. You've followed the rules, you've defended the faith against doubters, you've raised your children in it. Your entire social network is built within the church, the mosque, or the temple. To even consider the possibility that the foundational premise, the existence of your specific God, the divinity of your specific prophet, and the promise of your specific afterlife, is false, is to face an abyss. It would mean that your entire life, your sacrifices, your struggles, your hopes, have been based on a fiction. It would mean that the moral code you so ardently followed was arbitrary. It would mean the comfort you felt in prayer was just a conversation with yourself. It would invalidate not just your past, but your present and your future. The psychological weight of that realization is, for many, simply too much to bear. It is the sunk cost fallacy on a cosmic scale. So, what happens when evidence or logic begins to challenge that monumental investment? What happens when the world does not conform to the neat promises of Scripture? You do not, like the logical moviegoer, simply walk out of the theater. The cost is too high. Instead, you do the opposite. You double down. You invest more. And what is the absolute final, most irreversible investment you can possibly make? Your own life. The act of martyrdom is the ultimate expression of the sunk cost fallacy. It is the final, spectacular, non-refundable payment. At the moment a person decides to die for their belief, they are not just expressing faith. They are slamming the door shut on the possibility of ever admitting they were wrong. To die for a cause is to make that cause for you retroactively and absolutely true. The alternative, to face the executioner or the flames and think, wait, have I made a catastrophic error with my one and only existence? Is a psychological cataclysm so profound that the mind will do almost anything to avoid it? Dying becomes easier than admitting you have wasted your life. The sacrifice itself becomes the ultimate self-justification. It's a tragic but psychologically potent defense mechanism against the terror of being wrong about everything that matters. The Armor of Dissonance. This leads us directly to the engine room of self-delusion, a concept that underpins so much of human irrationality: cognitive dissonance. First theorized by the psychologist Leon Festinger in the 1950s, cognitive dissonance is the profound mental discomfort we experience when we hold two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values, or when our actions clash with our beliefs. Our minds crave consistency. Contradiction feels like a pebble in our mental shoe, an unresolved chord in a piece of music. It creates a tension that we are powerfully motivated to resolve. The classic experiment that demonstrated this is as simple as it is brilliant. Festinger and his colleague Merrill Carl-Smith had student subjects perform a series of mind-numbingly boring tasks for an hour, like turning pegs on a pegboard, over and over again. Afterwards, the experimenter asked the student to do him a favor. He needed them to tell the next participant, who was waiting outside, that the tasks were actually really interesting and enjoyable. In other words, he asked them to lie. For this small service, some students were paid $20, a handsome sum in the 1950s, while others were paid only $1. Afterwards, another researcher, supposedly for a different study, interviewed the students and asked them how much they had genuinely enjoyed the boring tasks. Here's the fascinating result. The students who were paid $20 for lying consistently rated the tasks as dull and boring. They had a clear and sufficient justification for their lie. I did it for the money. Their action, lying, and their belief, the task was boring, were not in significant conflict because the $20 resolved the tension. But the students who were paid only $1 had a problem. They had lied, but for a pathetically small amount of money. This created a powerful state of cognitive dissonance. They held two contradictory cognitions. The task was incredibly boring, and I lied and said it was fun for almost no reason. The easiest way for the mind to resolve this painful contradiction was not to take back the lie, but to change their original belief. And so they convinced themselves that, you know what, the tasks weren't so bad after all. In fact, they were kind of interesting. They genuinely came to believe their own lie because believing the lie was less psychologically painful than admitting they were the kind of person who would lie for a pittance. Now, let's apply this powerful principle to the grand stage of religious faith. Religion is a veritable factory for cognitive dissonance. Consider the classic problem of evil. A believer holds the cognition, my God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and perfectly good. At the same time, they are confronted with the undeniable reality of the world. Innocent children die of agonizing diseases, natural disasters wipe out entire communities, and monstrous cruelty goes unpunished. These two cognitions are in stark, screaming contradiction. The dissonance is immense. So, how is it resolved? Rarely is it resolved by abandoning the first belief, the one in a good and powerful God. As we saw with the sunk cost fallacy, that investment is far too great. Instead, the mind scrambles to reduce the dissonance by adding new, harmonizing cognitions. in other words, by creating rationalizations. These are the familiar refrains we've all heard. God works in mysterious ways, which is a cognitive blank check that dismisses any and all contradictory evidence. It's a test of our faith, which reframes suffering as a noble, purposeful trial rather than senseless tragedy. It's due to original sin, or it's the work of the devil, which outsources the blame to a different cosmic agent. The suffering in this life is insignificant compared to the eternal reward in the next, which devalues the contradictory evidence. Each of these is a mental maneuver designed to reduce the friction, to soothe the dissonance, and to keep the core belief intact. It's like putting duct tape on a leaking dam. It doesn't fix the fundamental structural problem, but it stops the immediate, uncomfortable spray. This brings us back to the martyr. The act of sacrificing one's life creates the most extreme cognitive dissonance imaginable. On one hand, you have the most powerful biological and psychological drive known to any organism, the will to live, to preserve your own existence. On the other hand, you have the belief that requires you to extinguish that existence. The contradiction is absolute. I am ending my precious life is in direct conflict with life is precious. The tension must be unbearable. Just like the student who was paid $1, the martyr cannot easily justify their action with an external reward. They must find an internal justification, and the only way to do that is to inflate the value of the belief they are dying for until it eclipses the value of life itself. The mind, in this desperate state, must conclude that the belief is not just true, but that it is the most important truth in the universe. The promise of paradise, the righteousness of the cause, the glory of God, these concepts must become more real, more vivid, and more valuable than the feeling of sun on your skin or the sound of a loved one's voice. The act of suffering and dying for the belief becomes the ultimate, irrefutable proof of its validity. If I am willing to go through this, then it must be true. The dissonance is resolved not by shying away from the sacrifice, but by embracing it so fully that it transforms into a glorious act of supreme certainty. The pain itself becomes a confirmation. This is the tragic psychological armor of dissonance, turning a bug in our mental software into a feature for a fanatical faith. The warm embrace of the in-group. A belief is rarely held in a vacuum. A person might construct an elaborate system of personal justifications, but the durability of that system, especially under pressure, often depends on one crucial factor: other people. We are, at our very core, tribal creatures. For hundreds of thousands of years on the savannah, our survival depended not on our individual strength, but on our ability to cooperate and belong to a cohesive group. The tribe provided safety from predators, shared resources, and mates. To be part of the in-group was to live. To be cast out, to become an outcast, was a death sentence. This ancient, hardwired imperative to belong still hums beneath the surface of our modern lives, and religious organizations are perhaps the most powerful exploiters of this deep human need. A religion is not just a set of ideas, it is a community. It is a tribe. It offers a powerful prepackaged identity. You are no longer just you, an isolated individual navigating a chaotic world. You are one of us. The chosen, the saved, the enlightened. This instantly provides a sense of belonging, purpose, and, most importantly, validation. The strange beliefs that might seem questionable in isolation suddenly feel solid and reasonable when you are surrounded by hundreds or thousands of other people who all profess them with unwavering confidence. This is the principle of social proof. If everyone around you is acting as if something is true, you become far more likely to accept it as true yourself. It's a cognitive shortcut. Instead of critically evaluating the belief on its own merits, we trust the collective judgment of our tribe. All these good, sincere, intelligent people can't all be wrong, can they? This group cohesion is intensified through shared rituals. Praying together, singing hymns, partaking in sacred meals, chanting in unison. These activities are not just symbolic. They are powerful neurobiological tools for synchronizing a group. When people perform rhythmic actions together, their heart rates can align, and their brains release endorphins and oxytocin, the bonding hormone. These rituals bypass the rational prefrontal cortex and tap directly into the emotional limbic parts of the brain, creating a powerful feeling of ecstatic unity, of being part of something larger than oneself. This shared emotional experience becomes a testament to the truth of the belief system that facilitates it. The feeling is real, therefore the cause of the feeling must be real. Furthermore, many of the most resilient religious groups employ what anthropologists and evolutionary biologists call costly signals. A costly signal is an action or trait that is so expensive to fake that it must be an honest indicator of one's quality or commitment. A peacock's massive, cumbersome tail is a costly signal to peahens. It says, "Look how healthy and strong I must be to survive and thrive, despite carrying this ridiculous, burdensome appendage." In human groups, costly signals demonstrate commitment. Religions that demand significant sacrifices, strict dietary laws like kosher or halal, mandatory tithing, prohibitions on common pleasures, difficult pilgrimages, or dangerous missionary work, are sending a costly signal. These demands serve two functions. First, they weed out the free riders, those who might want the benefits of community without any real commitment. Second, and more importantly for our purposes, they function as another layer of the sunk cost fallacy and cognitive dissonance for those who remain. The more a person gives up for the group, the more they sacrifice, the more valuable the group and its beliefs must become in their own mind to justify that sacrifice. Why would I be following all these difficult and restrictive rules if this wasn't the one true path? The shared hardship forges an incredibly powerful bond among the members. They have all paid a high price for admission, and this shared investment creates a formidable barrier against doubt, both from within and from outside. This is where the second engagement prompt for you all comes in. This in-group/out-group mechanic isn't exclusive to religion. It's a fundamental part of human psychology. Think about a time you felt an intense sense of belonging to a non-religious group. A passionate sports team fan base, a tight-knit group of friends in school, a fandom for a book or a show, even a demanding workplace. How did that powerful feeling of us influence your perceptions, your loyalty, or your actions? Share your experiences in the comments. It's fascinating to see how this powerful tribal instinct shapes our lives in countless ways, often without us even realizing it. Creating the other, the necessity of a villain. A tribe, a community, a chosen people. These identities are forged in a crucible, but a fire needs fuel, and a tribe is defined not only by who is inside the circle of warmth and light, but by who is left shivering in the darkness outside. The very concept of us is weak, almost meaningless, without a corresponding them. The strength of the in-group bond is directly proportional to the perceived threat or inferiority of the out-group. This is not a cynical observation. It is a fundamental principle of social psychology. To build a wall, you need two sides. Religion, in its most potent forms, is a master architect of this division. It takes the messy, complex spectrum of humanity and cleaves it in two with the brutal simplicity of a divine decree. There are the believers and the unbelievers, the faithful and the infidels, the righteous and the damned. This isn't just a casual sorting, it is a moral and metaphysical chasm. One group is privy to the ultimate truth, loved by the creator of the universe and destined for eternal glory. The other group is deluded, wallowing in sin, perhaps even in league with cosmic evil, and headed for a rather unpleasant eternal barbecue. It's a neat little trick of moral accounting. By creating an outgroup that is defined as lost or wicked, the in-group's own status as special and saved is instantly magnified. Their identity shines brighter against the backdrop of the other's darkness. This process, however, often escalates beyond simple categorization. To sustain a belief system in the face of a world full of decent, happy people who don't share your beliefs, a persistent source of cognitive dissonance, it becomes necessary to do more than just label them. It becomes necessary to vilify and, ultimately, to dehumanize them. It is psychologically difficult for most stable people to wish harm upon or feel righteous superiority over another person whom they recognize as a full, complex human being just like themselves. The solution is to mentally downgrade them, to strip them of their humanity. You see this coded into the very language of zealous faith. Outsiders are not just people with a different opinion, they are heathens, pagans, heretics, or apostates. They are likened to animals, dogs, pigs, snakes. Their minds are described as darkened, their hearts hardened, their souls corrupt. They are no longer fellow human beings on a different path. They are a sickness, a pollution, an infestation that threatens the purity of the righteous community. Once this mental transformation is complete, once the other has been successfully recategorized as something subhuman, a switch flips in the moral brain. Normal ethical considerations are suspended. Acts that would be considered atrocities if perpetrated against one of us become not only permissible but praiseworthy when directed at them. Persecution becomes a holy duty. Violence becomes a sacred cleansing. And what does this have to do with the martyr? Everything. The martyr is often not just dying for their God. They are dying in opposition to the enemies of their God. Their sacrifice is framed as an act of war, a final defiant blow against the corrupting influence of the unbelieving world. It imbues their death with a profound sense of agency and power. They are not a passive victim succumbing to fate. They are a warrior striking a blow for cosmic justice. They are not merely ending their own life. They are participating in a grand, epic struggle between good and evil, light and darkness. Their death becomes the ultimate testament to the evil of their enemies. "Look what these monsters have driven me to do!" the act screams. "My sacrifice is the ultimate proof of their depravity and my righteousness." The dehumanization of the enemy, therefore, is the psychological runway from which the martyr takes flight. It transforms an act of self-destruction into what they perceive as the ultimate act of heroism, the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card, the promise of paradise. There is one final spectacular piece of psychological machinery that we must examine. It is perhaps the most powerful of them all. It is the belief that has allowed religions to ask the ultimate price from their followers for millennia. It is the ultimate trump card, the divine loophole, the cosmic get-out-of-jail-free card, the promise of a glorious afterlife. Human beings are, by nature, terrible at weighing present costs against future rewards. We value a small pleasure today far more than a larger pleasure a year from now. This is called temporal discounting. It's why we eat the cake instead of sticking to the diet, why we hit the snooze button instead of getting up for a run. Our brains are wired for the immediate, but religion performs a breathtaking act of psychological jujitsu. It presents a future reward so infinitely vast, so overwhelmingly glorious, that it completely short-circuits this natural calculation. What is the pain of the executioner's blade compared to an eternity of bliss? What is the fleeting agony of fire compared to unending ages in the presence of God, reclining on silk cushions by rivers of wine? What is the sacrifice of 70 or 80 years of a troubled, difficult earthly existence when weighed against a googolplex of years of perfect, unimaginable happiness? The math is so laughably one-sided that it's no longer a choice. It's an obvious transaction. The promise of paradise devalues mortal life to the point of near worthlessness. It's like being offered the deed to an entire galaxy in exchange for a single grain of sand. Who wouldn't make that trade? The various descriptions of paradise in religious texts are masterpieces of marketing, tailored perfectly to the desires and deprivations of their original audiences. For desert nomads, it was a garden of lush greenery and ever-flowing water. For a patriarchal society constrained by strict sexual mores, it was a promise of eternally youthful, beautiful, and willing companions. For the poor and powerless, it was a kingdom of golden palaces where they would be served as kings and queens. These are not subtle theological concepts. They are direct appeals to our most fundamental, visceral desires for comfort, status, pleasure, and release from suffering. When this belief in a tangible, guaranteed paradise is fully internalized, death ceases to be the terrifying biological endpoint it is for a rationalist. It is transformed. It is not an end, but a transition. It is not a loss, but a graduation. For the martyr, it is a promotion to the highest possible rank. It reframes the ultimate sacrifice into the ultimate act of self-interest. They are not giving up their life. They believe they are upgrading it in the most spectacular way imaginable. They are cashing in their chips in the messy, painful casino of mortal life for a guaranteed, infinite jackpot in the great beyond. This belief system is the most powerful antidote to the fear of death ever conceived. It severs the connection between action and consequence in the here and now. Why fear pain when it's a passport to pleasure? Why fear loss when it's a gateway to infinite gain? The martyr in their final moments is often not in a state of terror, but in a state of anticipated ecstasy. They are convinced they are just seconds away from claiming the ultimate prize. It is a state of mind that makes them immune to reason, to pleas for life, and to the most powerful instinct hardwired into every living thing on this planet: the desperate, clawing, all-consuming will to survive. The fragility of the Mirage. So, why do people die for false beliefs? As we have seen, there is no single simple answer. It is a perfect storm of human psychology, a convergence of powerful and predictable forces. It begins with the sunk cost fallacy, where the immense investment of one's identity into a faith makes it too painful to ever admit it was a mistake. It is protected by the armor of cognitive dissonance, which forces the mind to warp reality itself to resolve the painful contradiction between a benevolent God and a cruel world. This personal conviction is then amplified and solidified by the warm, tribal embrace of the in-group, whose shared rituals and costly sacrifices create a powerful sense of belonging and validation. That sense of us is sharpened by the creation of a dehumanized them, a villainous outgroup whose existence transforms persecution and violence into a righteous cause. And finally, the entire structure is crowned with the ultimate rationalization, the promise of an eternal paradise, a reward so magnificent that it makes the sacrifice of one's own life seem not like a tragedy, but like the smartest trade a person could ever make. None of this is to say that every believer is a potential martyr, or that these psychological mechanisms are inherently evil. They are, for the most part, features of the human mind that help us navigate a complex social world. But they are also bugs in our software, vulnerabilities that can be systematically exploited. And religion, over thousands of years of trial and error, has evolved into the most effective system for exploiting them ever known. The tragedy here is not in the lie, but in the sincerity. The people who die for these beliefs are often not monsters, but true believers. Their sacrifice is a testament to the terrifying, awesome power of an idea to overwhelm every rational instinct. Here at the God Mirage, our goal is not to mock the victims of these ideas, but to understand the mechanisms that create them. By holding these psychological forces up to the light, we can begin to see the strings behind the spectacle. We can learn to recognize the mirage for what it is and perhaps inoculate ourselves and our world against the fever of fanaticism. If you found this exploration valuable, please give this video a like and subscribe to the God Mirage for more deep dives into the psychology of belief. And for our final question, which of these psychological forces, the sunk cost, the dissonance, the in-group, the dehumanized enemy, or the promise of paradise, do you think is the most powerful driver of this kind of extremism? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay curious and question everything.